Well, since we are on that subject, Rahul Gandhi, also, I don't know whether you consider a serious remark or non-serious remark, talked of the fact that India is hiding the Chinese.
You're trying to make my Monday morning?
This question, and then we'll move on, that India is hiding the fact that China has been, has taken territory in the LAC and, wants us not to, to take on China. What is your view on this?
Today,
Yeah.
I mean, you have yourself a fairly deep knowledge of the security situation. Today, you have a deployment of the Indian Army on the China border that we've never had. It's done in order to counter Chinese deployments which were scaled up massively since 2020. Now, if we were in denial, how is the army out there? Because the army didn't go there because Rahul Gandhi asked them to go. I mean, the army went there because the Prime Minister of India ordered them to go. So, look, at the end of it all, I understand today, politics is politics, okay? People will say things. They may not be credible. They may sometimes contradict their own positions, their own behavior. All that could happen. But the fact is, what is finally the proof of the pudding? The proof of the pudding is that the Indian Army today is deployed to counter any attempt to unilaterally change the LAC. So that's your answer.
And you're saying that's a fitting reply that India is giving to China?
No, I'm saying that is the obligation of the Indian state and that is the duty and commitment of the Indian military. That we will not let any country, or in this case, China change the line of actual control unilaterally. So, I think it's fairly obvious. I think most of the people of the country see that. So, you can make your polemical points. I think people will treat it as politics.
Let's move to another area, and you were recently there at the UN Security, UN Security Council, where you, addressed a session on counterterrorism. Mm-hmm. What is the kind? Japan is equally concerned about it, has been a partner with us. What can India and Japan do in terms of helping each other to counter terrorism? What is our position? Do you look for them in terms of intelligence, in terms of software developments, technologies that can handle? And you mentioned one of the aspects of that was, the kind of misuse of technology to foster terrorism. The 4 things that you said over there, one of that was that. Do you see any cooperation that India and Japan can have on terrorism?
No. Look, terrorism is a very complicated field because actually what happens in terrorism is everybody develops their capabilities and countries get into, you can say, sharing or informing or assessment, exchanging relationships. So I wouldn't necessarily single out terrorism. It could be broader than that. But when you have a good strategic relationship with any partner, then part of that is really to shape your, to have those exchanges, and then the systems get comfortable with each other, and there are benefits that flow from it. But the fact is that while we are, of course, both Asian countries, we are located at 2 very distinct sub-regions, which each have their own challenges. But in this day and age, look, you never know who's helpful where. I mean, you'll be amazed at the countries, with whom we work sometimes. So I would look at it much more in terms of fostering that kind of systemic comfort rather than necessarily narrowing it down to terrorism.
Now, on the subject of terrorism, India and Pakistan relations touched a new low with the strong language used by your counterpart, Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto. Your comments on the fact that of the way he spoke.
Sorry?
What do you say about the way he spoke? And
I think my ministry has said very clearly what we think about what he said. So,
which is, I mean...
No, which is out there. I think we've said what we had to say.
Weren't you upset the way he spoke, the way he said everything that, talked of India and the way he talked of our Prime Minister?
Well, let's put it this way. Our expectations levels with the Pakistanis are never very high.
Okay. I know, we come back right to Japan. In terms of the fact that we are the G20 president, as well as Japan as the G7 presidency, how do you see us working together on some of the key issues of the world? Do you see some of the big things that we could take up together? We are the, G20 president, and Japan is the G7 presidency. Of course, G7 is represented over there, but is there ways we can work together to collaborate this?
Well, yes, because look, the G7, after all G7 members are G20 members. So together they are, more than a third of the G20 membership, and because they work as a group, they obviously are able to put their points of view across very, very strongly. So my sense is that when we look at the state of the world, look at issues today of debt, look at issues of digital challenges, health challenges, connectivity issues, there are, reform of multilateral institutions is something which Japan is as committed as we are. We are actually partners when it comes to some aspects of it. My sense is there will be a significant convergence between what the G7 under Japan is trying to do and what the G20 under India is trying to do. Our effort, we want to run a G20 which is very, very broad-based, which takes in as much inputs from as many parts of the world as possible, so that what it produces is actually serious and relevant and, in a sense, meets the demands of the day. So my sense is that you will see India and Japan working very closely on this G7, G20 connect.
Now, one of the issues is the global value chain, and this is my final question to you. India had hoped that the China plus one means India. What can, and Japan seems to, as you had mentioned earlier, look towards ASEAN countries in terms of investment, in terms of manufacturing, not looking at India. What do you think could turn the relationship on this? What is it that we can do ourselves, and what can Japan do to ensure that we become a greater part of the global value chain and be, seen as an alternative to China in some senses?
This is a fundamental question which has arisen, not just for Japan and India, not just for Japan, but for the entire world from the COVID experience. The COVID experience actually taught us what happens when there is over-concentration in a particular region, and I'm not saying this as a political point, any region or any country. If there is over-concentration, you have actually multiplied the risks. So you had COVID. Now COVID shut down a certain geography, and then the entire world was impacted. Okay, today it is COVID. Tomorrow it could be something else. It could be a massive climate event. It's very, I would say today the global economic security requires actually a much more decentralized globalization. It needs multiple production sectors. It needs redundant, resilient supply chains, more reliable supply chains, multiple supply chains. So the effort of the Modi government today to build up greater manufacturing in this country